Supervisor Flores,
Present.
Supervisor Ziegenmeier,
Present.
Supervisor Baines,
Present.
Supervisor Stevens.
Present. All right. And then when we roll into the other meeting, we'll let the roll call stand, and then we'll do the invocation afterwards. All right, first of all, we're going to open up for public comment first. Actually, Neil, take it away.
Good afternoon, Supervisors, Chair and Supervisors. Appreciate your time this afternoon to have this study session related to code enforcement. So it was a number of months ago, probably close to 9 months ago, that Supervisors Flores and Stevens had a meeting with our department seeking some improvements or enhancements to the code enforcement program. So with that, our Assistant Director, James Stevens, has been working with staff and evaluating our program and also meeting with County Council regarding some recent legislative changes that our ordinance code may need updates on. And so what James will be presenting this afternoon to you are a variety of topics and ideas and suggestions and recommendations for our program for your consideration, and we're happy to answer questions along the way. And then at the end, we're happy to take guidance from your board as to what you might like us to return with, like I said, ordinance changes or other policies or procedures. And so with that, I'll have James come up.
Thank you, Neil. Good afternoon, board, President Ziegenmeier. Sorry about that, guys. A little nervous this afternoon. A little excited today to be talking about code enforcement. As Director Hay mentioned, the PowerPoint will kind of be broken up into 3 different sections. One will be background, another one will be some statistical information, and then the third section will be the recommendations. And then just a quick note on the recommendations. They're kind of in 3 different categories. Some of them, as Neil mentioned, are legal requirements that we need to change and make to our program. Some of them are things that are already on the books and we need to create a policy for. And then a couple of them are just brand new ideas. So I just want to give you that little bit of background about the presentation. And we'll go ahead and get started. I like to start out presentations with code enforcement with a picture of the team. I know you guys get calls all the time and, you know, people order this and that, but that's our team. 4 of the hardest working people in the county. They deal with a lot. They drive far, they answer phone calls, emails, they help the public to no end. And when I came to this organization, you know, they were some of the first people that, you know, helped me feel welcome and feel a part of the team. And so I always like to highlight the people. So from left to right, we have Crystal, who's one of our development services technician, Jag and Austin, our code enforcement officers, and then Janine, who is one of our who is our only building inspector, I would say. This slide also highlights mission statement. I wrote this mission statement shortly after I got here, and I kind of just want to, you know, highlight the second portion of it. Actually, you know what? I'll read the whole thing. Sutter County Code Enforcement Division is committed to protecting the health and safety and the general welfare of the community by ensuring compliance with county codes and regulations. Through fair, consistent, and professional enforcement, we support quality development, preserve community standards, enhance the quality of life for residents, businesses, and visitors while providing responsive and respectable customer service. Oftentimes I find when I do these presentations, people often don't know what code enforcement does. So just a quick highlight of what code enforcement kind of does in Sutter County. We handle building code violations. We handle property maintenance violations. Overgrown vegetation. Grading violations. This looks a little off though, you know, still seeing piles of dirt, but the compliance looks different everywhere. Here we were able to work with these property owners and have them get their grading permits. So just another effort in trying to work with the community to have voluntary compliance. We also do nuisance abatements, where we go out and clean the properties at the cost of the county, and then we'll go back and put a lien on the property and try to recover our cost. This was a property down in Robbins near Eucalyptus. I believe it was like 5 parcels or something to that effect. So, but let's put a pin in that and we'll come back to that later in the presentation. As I mentioned, here's a few years of statistical performance from code enforcement from 2020 to 2025. The blue highlights the cases opened, the orange highlights total inspections, and the gray is citations. I like this slide because what it shows is that while we have, you know, the number of cases fluctuates. You see the number of inspections versus the number of citations. What that shows us is that the team's going out there, working with people, doing compliance checks, making sure people are, living up to their end of the bargain without escalating the case. In 2024, I think we opened over 200 cases. We did almost 400 inspections, and I think we issued maybe 10 citations the entire year. So that is the kind of community service standard that I believe in and that I hold my staff accountable to. Code enforcement also involves citations, unfortunately. Doing some research, we came to find out that currently there's about $115,000 in outstanding marijuana violation citations owed to the county, and there's about $367,000 due in all other violations. This is the one that got my attention. Of that money, currently approximately $215,000 of it is currently ready to be brought in front of the board for special assessment. So that is something that is, we'll talk about a little bit more of that in the recommendation portion. Here we are with recommendations. As Neil also mentioned, there's been several law changes that directly impact code enforcement. There's been SB 296, there's been SB 740, and there's a number of these laws that have been passed at the state level to mandate certain levels of enforcement at the county level, and we'll highlight a few of them. AB 548 in 2023. The important part about this law is the bottom one. The develop policies and procedures for inspecting multi-unit residential properties. Basically, California passed a law that said, hey, if you have more than 3 properties on one parcel, it's considered multifamily. And if you have an issue like electrical, rodent infestation, or insect infestation, something that may affect those other units, you legally have to knock on the door and ask, are you having the problem now? The state is mandating that. The language specifically says reasonable effort for building inspectors and code officers. So, it's trying to force the hand of jurisdictions to do more thorough inspections and make sure that all the issues are being addressed. Because let's be honest, if you go into a unit and you spray for rats or roaches and there's a shared wall and you don't go next door, well, they just went next door. So, this one is also very important specifically because currently Sutter County has no policies and procedures. It's been a program run through oral tradition passed down from different officers. There's really nothing in writing. And so, as required by law, we will be drafting some policies and procedures, including this last bullet point, to make sure that we stay compliant with state law. This is a big one. Drafting a new county ordinance to govern our due process. I've worked for a number of organizations, and to be honest, the ordinance for code enforcement is a little choppy here. It's not really efficient, and it's not really effective, and I find it to be cost burdensome. And specifically what I mean by that is, I'll start with the bottom one. Our code mandates that our code officers, when they issue a citation, they are required to schedule an administrative hearing for that citation. We have a high number of no-shows, and we're paying that fee to the hearing officer regardless of showing or not. The other interesting issue about that last one is that there was a court case in Fremont. It made it all the way to the state Supreme Court. It was 1,001 Buddhist monks versus the city of Fremont. And to make a long story short, in the building code, in the administrative section, there is, talks about the Construction Board of Appeals. A very smart attorney said, hey, this is how my client's violation should be handled, not this administrative hearing officer process. The Superior Court and the state Supreme Court agreed with him. So now jurisdictions are required to set up a Construction Board of Appeals or a committee to hear building code violations and zoning violations if they are attached together. The only way that we can continue using the current model of administrative hearing is if that is a standalone zoning violation. So like overgrown vegetation, inoperable vehicles, right? So it's forcing jurisdictions to come up with ways to be more just and fair to the responsible parties, right? It is kind of disconcerting when the process is all done by one person. The other caveat to that law is that the jurisdiction cannot sit on that board. So what some jurisdictions have done is partner with each other. So I will be reaching out to Marysville, Yuba City, Sacramento County does a lot with Sac City and Roseville and Fremont, and they take turns sitting on each other's Board of Appeals to hear it to stay compliant with the state law. The other issue with the ordinance that I found is it's not really clear for the officers or our residents. It's very indecisive, and it doesn't allow the officers to, I think, sometimes accurately explain it. And not that they're doing it wrong, the code is just written in such a way that it doesn't allow for an efficient due process from start to finish, right? There's a lot of hodgepodge steps in between citations and things that you have to do that make it wildly inexpensive, that drive up staff cost and take up staff resources. As I mentioned, some of these things, recommendations are recommendations we already currently do, but maybe establishing a process. When we have continued noncompliance, so let's say we issue a notice of violation and then they don't respond to us, we'll give them some time to reach out to us to try to abate these violations. If they do not comply, our first punitive action will be to record a violation on the property and an issued administrative citation. Unfortunately, continued noncompliance is expensive. It costs money to have someone walk from our office to get in a car, drive to a property, do an inspection, come back, do all the administrative work associated with it, and to do that over and over again and not have a way, our system in place to recover those costs. We have to recognize the fact that we have to take steps, if we're going to continue with this program, that we're going to have to establish some level of recovery for our cost. Not necessarily our fines and citations, but our literal overhead and things of that cost money. So as I mentioned, this will be one of the first two punitive steps for continued noncompliance. We will continue to work with individuals, but this will help ensure that, as it says up here, properties, transfers without resolution, provides public notice of unresolved violations, and, it really kind of encourages the individual to come talk to us if they try to do something with their property. Take unpaid fees to the Board of Supervisors and special tax assessments. Again, something else that's already on the books, but there's no formal process for it. It's been my understanding that these hearings haven't taken place in some time. And so it might be a good idea to reinstate them to start recovering some of that outstanding $200,000 that is owed to the county, again, not for fines and citations, for outstanding staff costs. This is a new idea. So in a number of organizations that I've worked with, excuse me, take a sip. Sorry about that. In a number of organizations I worked with, they have some sort of fund, right? Typically, it's called a community restitution account or something along those lines to help offset the cost of abatements or any other costs associated with the program. Remember I asked you to remember that, that picture of the nuisance abatement? We went out to the Robbins and we kind of cleaned up that property and did that whole thing. That alone costs over $53,000. The department currently has a, I think, annual or fiscal annual budget of $75,000 to do any abatements. So that one abatement has eaten up the majority of our fund to clean up properties. Community restitution account or some form of it would then also help offset the cost of abatements, help with community cleanups. We've used it in other jurisdictions to help low-income residents get trash dumpsters on their property. We've helped seniors fix sewer laterals with it. So coming up with a way to utilize the funds that are coming in for citations and our staff costs might be something we might want to consider, because that would help expand and enhance our program. The equipment and purchase of handheld radios. Another one from the state. California passed SB 296, and it basically sets a standard for officer safety. And one of the things it specifically says is that, officers working in areas should have radios that if they, they don't have consistent phone coverage, something along those lines. The department, I'm working with Neil, everything goes up in price, everything costs. Working with Neil, we've determined that we have a budget currently for 2 radios. Purchasing these 2 radios would then allow our officers to be much more efficient. There's currently 1 radio between the 2, and it's attached to a vehicle. So if something happens to them, they've got to get back to the car. So we want to provide them with some safety equipment that would allow them to be able to reach the sheriff's office should something happen to them, be in some sort of distress, and then also maintain communication with the office. However, these are over $5,000 and they are capital purchases. So we would be hoping that the board would direct us to come back, staff report, to purchase these radios to enhance our program and enhance the safety of our officers. Finally, implementation. A number of ways that we can roll this thing out, utilize the social media platforms, print media, update our website, kind of roll the program over, start anew, reissue new violations to existing property owners, saying, hey, we've got a new ordinance. We're going to send you this new notice. We're going to kind of start over, right? We're going to give you an opportunity to come back and go compliance. We're going to start over. We want to work with you. And then also include clear explanations of how administrative fines or the new administrative fines and appeal system would work. Lastly, conduct informal meetings, workshops for property owners, coordinate outreach with other county departments, and then internally, we have to ramp up as well, right? So, establish internal rollout schedule for staffing, policy activation, and ordinance enforcement, and then monitor the compliance trends. Are these suggested changes effective? Are we, did we make the right tweaks? But monitor the changes and see how we improved or did not improve the program. And with that, I will take any questions the board may have.
With that, before we bring it back to the board, we're going to open up the public comment. Is there any public comment? Being no public comment, we're going to close the public comment, bring back for the board for discussions.
To the chair. James, first, I want to just say thank you for all the hard work you put into organizing this. I know it's taken several months, and I appreciate all the hard work. A couple questions I have. First-time violations, is there going to be warning or citations issued on first-time violations?
I firmly believe in communication first. I've never worked in an organization specifically like Sacramento. When you get your first letter for Sac County, you get a citation. Right? I believe in an education and information program, right? You will get a notice of violation. In fact, one of the things Neil and I have talked about is should we go to a 2-letter system? I think the compromise that we've made is that we will extend like a standard compliance time. So like no matter if you have overgrown weeds or a bunch of cars, you will likely get a notice of violation for a standard 30 days. Unless it's something like life safety where, hey, this is about to fall on you. We're thinking about standardizing that because look, it takes time to get someone out there to cut the grass or to move this stuff. And we want to be customer service friendly without the cost, right? If you call us and it takes 6 months to clean up your property, it's not going to cost you a dime. We're going to come out there. We're going to do these inspections. You're working with us. But when you stop calling us, when we have to chase you down, when we have to escalate these cases, that's when we want to invoke our staff recovery and make sure that the taxpayers who are abiding by the code and the rules aren't having, to pay for someone else's noncompliance.
Okay, next question. Are we still going to be complaint-driven, or will that change?
No, we will still be complaint-driven. However, I will say that our building inspector, per se, if she's driving down the street, this happened last week, driving down the street and saw a 2nd-story structure being built. Well, she had to issue a stop work, tag it, right? So there are some things that are proactive, but yes, we will still be complaint-based.
But that's going on right now, even without the new ordinance.
That is correct.
Okay.
That is correct.
Okay. The new policy is anything in place for the Board of Supervisors to have veto power, or is that totally off the table? As far as if somebody comes to I think in the past, people have been able to come to our board and say, and the board, I'd just as soon not have veto power, but maybe the board would like to have veto power and saying this shouldn't happen or whatever.
If I hear you correctly, I think you're kind of talking about special assessment. And I've had a conversation or two with our esteemed county council. And the way it is currently structured, yes, the board would hear the special assessments. That would be at the end of the case, right? So, you know, all the violations have been abated. They had a long period of noncompliance, and we're now trying to recover our actual cost. We would then come here and say, you know, board members at 123 Main Street, they had these violations, we have this many notices, we have this many citations, tell you the cost, and then it would be your discretion to, you know, uphold that amount or whatever other amount. I could believe county council can articulate that a little bit better, but as it is structured right now, and I haven't received any direction to change that, the board would be the final hearing authority on that.
My personal opinion is I would like to change that where we would not have the authority to do that because everybody's going to be asking us for it, and then we're going to be playing favorites, and I don't like that.
Why would you do that?
I can actually clarify some of this. When it comes to the board, what the board is actually doing is authorizing development services to place it on the property tax lien. And so essentially what we've done is previously when we drafted the marijuana ordinance, what I did was I made it so the board had very limited discretion on the things that it was determining. For example, if a landowner was unaware that marijuana was growing on the property, the board could make an exception and say that they weren't responsible for it, but they had to make a determination that they didn't know that it was growing and that through reasonable diligence they could not have learned. And so we can adapt a similar situation here whereby it's very limited questions that are being asked of the board, and so it doesn't put the board in a position of just subjectively making decisions.
Okay, once again, thank you, James, for this.
To the chair.
Yes, well, hold on, I think a lot of this stems from constituents reaching out to us, like, let's say, Supervisor Baines is a property owner. Supervisor Stevens used to be a property owner. A guy comes in, parks his trailer on Supervisor Baines' property, makes it a huge colossal mess. He's trying to get this person out, doing the proper way procedure. It's costing him thousands of dollars. At the end of the day, he's going to get the fine because he is the property owner, because that mess is on his property. And that's what the constituents in the rural areas get upset about, because they're going through the proceedings and the hearings, and yet they're the ones with the bill on having to pay for the cleanup of their property that they didn't make, even though they're getting cited, because it is their property. So that's the tough part, you know, being in a rural community with it's so stretched thin, with code enforcement that is reactive, and having a piece of property that could be out in the middle of nowhere, you know what I mean? Maybe the landowner doesn't go to one side of the property because there's not much getting grown over there. So I'm just curious how the workaround is on something in that instance.
And I can address that one as well. That would fall under the similar situation as long as the owner is making good faith efforts to get the person to move the property, then that would be something that would be within the discretion of the board. However, if they're enabling it or not taking any action, that would be a situation where they would be subject to it.
All right. Is there any other discussion?
I would just like to-
Yes.
Sorry, I just want to say thank you for the presentation. If I went through your slides right, so the total outstanding citations, 482,000?
Sounds about right, plus or minus. This presentation was ready in about February, so we've had some payments.
Probably gone up since then.
No, it's actually gone down.
Okay.
We've had some people make some payments, so give or take $10,000, $20,000.
And then the special assessments you're talking about coming before the board later on, that's in addition to those, or that's part of those?
That is included that.
Okay. And then and what was the total amount on your community restitution account? What did you say the total was?
So right now, it's not even called that, right? We literally have a line item in our budget that's just allocated $75,000 for abatement cleanup, or there's abatement fund, something like that. And that is what the department has on hand to conduct those sort of things. I've been doing this sort of thing well over 20 years. Just like everything else, it has gone up extremely. And if we have properties like that in the county, which I know that we do, and we want to take that kind of action, we would likely need to find additional revenue funds, which we're looking for grants and things like that too.
And then just one last question is going back to the slide that you showed us. It cost us $53,000 to clean up. Have we thought of reaching out to some nonprofits, not to name any names, but I heard there's one in town that they kind of clean up on the last Saturday of the month. To kind of help and kind of take that
There are
ownership in those type of projects, or?
Okay, there are, but one thing we have to remember is that we have 2 code enforcement officers for this entire county, right? And they are stretched extremely thin. And that typically, unfortunately, falls to the property owner. We do, I know that our officers have been in the community for a long time, so they may be able to, kind of, know something, but we currently don't do that. And, ultimately, it is of my opinion that we would have to make a decision on an organizational level, because with limited resources, it makes it hard to kind of, equitably do that sort of thing. So it might be best to allow that responsibility to stay with the property owner, have them allocate or have them seek those resources, and then maybe we can provide some level of support, like, again, trash bins, maybe something of those lines. But I think it's best for the property owners to reach out and make those connections.
No, I agree, but I was just trying to get it. You said it cost us $53,000.
Yes.
So I would just say, before we take on that responsibility, may we reach out to those nonprofits for some help? Or, we give some pretty big awards in different projects in this community to the construction companies and that. I mean, I've seen some heavy equipment in there. Maybe somebody could, offer their services or equipment, just as a gesture, and then but yeah, that was the main thing. I just, again, appreciate your presentation.
Mr. Chairman, just for clarification on that issue, there are 2 different levels. If a organization was willing to assist, we would recommend that they assist the owner in the clearing up. In the event that the county is doing it, we're generally doing an abatement warrant. And so we're going to the court and we're getting the court to order allowing the county to go onto the property to take care of it. We wouldn't be able to get an order for another organization to do it.
Thank you. Thanks for the clarity.
To the chair.
I'm sorry, Supervisor.
James, thanks again for your presentation. Truly appreciate it. I noticed on one of your graphs here with the orange and blue and gray bars, you said you have some of these cases are open. Have these been closed?
Yes. Oh, yes.
Because you didn't have a bar here saying how many are remaining open or how many carried through or where we're at.
You have found my PowerPoint weakness. So I was only able to get 3 graphs on there. I guess you can put a number up there, right? Okay. But I chose those 3. No, currently, in fact, we did a count maybe not more than 2 weeks ago. We were right around 98 cases, plus or minus. I know we've closed a few, but no, the majority of those cases have been closed. And like I said, we are currently hovering around about 100 cases that span over maybe 3 or 4 years.
And then to shirt tail on Carm's question regarding some of these cleanup and abatements, maybe in some of these bigger items, maybe we should consider allowing, they're going to be in there 30 days. Maybe we open it up for bid for some nonprofits to actually make an offer what it would cost to put it together, as opposed to us putting the $52,000. Maybe somebody like, some other nonprofit might come in and say, hey, let's do that. Well, let's bid that for $20,000. We'll do it. And so we're at a savings. So not just only to reach out for a grant program, but maybe possibly, to get them some money heading their direction too, where we're not putting the whole $70,000 out.
Through the chair for a second.
Yes. Yeah.
A couple comments, Jeff. One, we're not out that 53,000. We are now.
Yeah.
They're going to be out of it because it's going to be on their tax. Well, it's not even going to be on their lien anymore. It's going to be on tax roll. So we're going to get collected that money quickly versus whenever they sell, if they ever sell. One thing I'd like to ask you, James, is we have our department over there. You have lots of experience and everything. For an area this big, are we sufficient on a department size, or are we way understaffed, or what's your feeling?
No. And I say that because of where we are going, not where we currently are. We've talked about business licenses. I know things have been mentioned about condition monitoring, meaning monitoring use permits, the conditions that are, associated with them. There's a number of things that have been, talked about in terms of that seem to be realistic program expansion. Do we need a whole lot of staff? No, but we probably could use another officer once we get involved in some of these other enforcement areas. Business license, if that does come down the pike, that's going to be a lot of time in the field. And the standard rule of thumb for code enforcement is every one action in the field equals 2 actions in the office. So, having the appropriate staff, having the appropriate support staff. One of the things I can say about our team, she's not here today, Crystal, she's one of the best administrative people I've seen in my life, right? And I've worked in Palo Alto and all these other crazy places. She is very, very good at her job. And so having, additional help with that would probably set the program, forward, and once we got into some of those other type of enforcement opportunities.
Because one of the things I wrote down when you were just talking about it, this is going to make their life easier, I believe. And so that's one of the reasons I was asking that question, because they're going to have a direction to go instead of, like you said, it was all kind of.
It will be, if we come back with a new ordinance per your direction, the ordinance that I've discussed with Bill, we've kind of been working on, it will be clearly explainable to our residents and clearly repeatable by our staff, right? None of these, well, we got to wait 10 days for here, or we got to ask the director for this. It's our current code does not allow for efficiency and a smooth process from complaint to compliance. And ultimately, the recommendation there is trying to make it friendlier for our customers to reach us and work with them, but still having the tools necessary to take the appropriate enforcement action should we need to.
Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor.
So first of all, thanks for the presentation. Appreciate it. I wanted to just talk about a couple of things, because you mentioned a few times that the staff is stretched too thin, and then you mentioned there's 100 open cases, and there's 4 staff members, but 100 open cases over several years, right? That just doesn't sound too thin to me, so I'm just wondering, am I missing something?
Yeah, a number of those cases are very involved,
Okay.
so in fact, a number of those cases reached into our other divisions, right? Into engineering, into planning, into environmental health. It's gone are the days, is it just simply my grass is too long, right? And like I said, those cases are over maybe a couple years, right? So
Right.
The administrative time it takes, working with county council, getting hearings set up. One of the other things the office has recently started is with some of our older cases, re-engaging the violators with a free pre-application meeting. So getting all of the subject matter experts, so engineering, building, whoever they may need, into a room. We prepare a comment form. So if you submit an application, planning will send you comments back. We prepare a document like that with all the necessary requirements from each of the divisions to the responsible parties, so that, yes, they've been disengaged from us for a while, but here's a new opportunity. We've created this document for you. This is your roadmap forward. And so working with Neil, working with county council, we've kind of, introduced that in an attempt to try to bring those people back in, right? And unfortunately, that is the one tool that we have to do that, because we do not have an end game in code enforcement, right? Code enforcement is the administrative process. For continued noncompliance, the administrative process, it goes through Mr. Van Sack's office, right?
Sure.
So it's establishing the due process and the policies and procedures to enforce it, but it's also building the infrastructure for a complete program, right? And so while that may not sound like it's stretched thin, sir, I assure you, you've been riding in a truck for 2 hours going to the south part of county, having to do 3 inspections.
Right.
Yeah, drive time does add up, or windshield time, I would say, so.
Sure, I understand. I just work in a different jurisdiction where there's a code officer who has like over 300
Yes.
open cases at the moment,
sir.
so just wondering. But so then on this too, I think that your ordinance will help streamline some of that burden, which will help. And then we're going to increase the burden because we're asking for more as well, right?
That is
so.
Correct.
And then you brought up, the cost of radios and the cost of staffing. What is the overall budget for enforcement right now? I know we're doing budget meetings soon, but I'm just wondering what that amount was, or approximate, if you got it.
So roughly, it's probably about, so I'll say $250,000 in staff, and then the community restitution count is about 75,000. So the 250 would also include some of the training and such for staff.
Okay, and then the radios you're going to ask us for, what will those cost, the 4 radios?
So they're approximately 5,000 apiece.
Yeah, they're 5,000. Yeah, about 5,000 each, just over 5K. Same distributor as the sheriff's department. It'll be the exact same radios.
Okay, and then Neil, will that 5K be inclusive in that 250K approximation, or are you going to be requesting a higher amount?
So the staff time is, I'll say, already in this year's budget, and it's in next year's recommended budget or proposed budget. The purchase of the radios, we actually can do within cost savings within the division this current fiscal year. We'd have to come before your board because, as James mentioned, it's a capital asset in order to purchase those. But would have the funds available this fiscal year to buy them, or we can buy them next fiscal year. But we wouldn't be seeking additional funds to buy the radios.
Okay, to just be part of the overall budget that we do. Okay, and then just for my clarification on the community restitution account, can you explain like exactly how that is refunded? Is it just a general fund money that goes in, or is it money that we collect from the fines?
In true code enforcement form, it depends.
Okay.
And so it depends on how it's set up and how it's operated, right? So in one organization I worked for, we had initial seed money from the general fund, and then it was funded thereafter with staff costs and any recovered citations. So literally people who were the serious violators were then paying to help the people who were being displaced from landlord-tenant issues or, helping seniors repair sewer laterals, that kind of thing. So it is typically replenished by recovered fines and recovered staff costs. And that's going to be another key component to what we're going to be doing. We're going to be much more serious about recovering our costs.
Excellent. Okay, great. And then again, I just want to express my appreciation for you getting this staff report together and presenting this to us the way you have. I think this is something that Supervisor Stevens and myself in particular came along, and we were looking for it to be more aggressive, in code enforcement, just from eyeballing things around, that it's time that we take action to do that, and looking forward to seeing this come forward to the board. Thank you.
I got one last question. General fund money, you mentioned general fund money. How much are we talking about in general fund money? Because I look at department heads, they're going to be in this room here shortly. $250,000, $250,000.
Sorry, maybe through the chair, maybe I can clarify. So the $250,000, that is the cost of staff that's included in our department budget. So that's not directly general fund, but it certainly is a component of the overall cost of the program. Certainly, like for example, the $75,000 that we budget for cleanup of properties, that's currently what we budget, and yes, those would be general fund dollars. And to give some context, the $50,000 case down in Robbins was a very unusual case. We probably spent somewhere between $4,000 and $10,000 on other property cleanups. But yeah, there's certainly the cost of the program, depending on the amount of fines and special assessments that are recovered. That's the only way that would reduce the cost to the general fund for the program.
Okay, like I said, we're going into budget hearing and everyone's asking for general fund. And it's always been tough with this board. Every board that I've sat on the last 8 years is finding that general fund money, especially when I look over at behavioral health and I look at the sheriff's department that's going to be in here in a little bit, and fire and so forth. I've been here in my 8 years. I've seen times where we have one code enforcement officer, because at the end of the day, we're looking at needs and wants and so forth, and it's really tough to find money, to allocate those funds places. So when you come in here saying that, hey, we're going to need general fund money, like I said, my ears pop open, and, but I love this report. This is a great analysis of everything through and through.
Sir, if I may, we're not requesting any general fund money. That was a suggestion because other organizations have started that way. Knowing our financial situation, having that conversation with the CAO's office and my director, we know that's not a reasonable path forward for us. We're probably more focused on recovering the fines and staff costs to offset any cost to the general fund. So I just want to be clear on that.
Can I?
Thank you. Yes, sir.
One more question, James. Two of the code enforcement issues at the present time I know of, the one down in Robbins, and then also there was a large one with the sewage down there in Robbins. If we go out with a new policy, we can issue new citations, so then we can put it on property tax roll, or is it once?
Thank you for the question, Supervisor Stevens. So two kind of things there. We can lien your property for fines and for citations, right? We can recover the cost of, our overhead. That's what we can place on your tax rolls. So in essence, code enforcement in most places works there's two hypothetical buckets of money, right? There's the fines and the citations, and then there's the overhead cost. So the overhead cost is what is allowed to be recovered by the government code, and that's where the issue of non-compliance comes up, because that's when you start utilizing staff costs and resources, and that's what we would want to come back and, as Supervisor Flores mentioned, in a more aggressive manner, to then be able to use some of those funds to continue to offset the cost of, let's be honest, we deal with a number of landlord-tenant relocations, right? We want to be able to have our people living in safe, clean places. We want to make sure that, our communities are well kept. So, being able to use those funds for other things to just offset the cost of enforcement, right? Whatever enforcement may be. One of the things we've done is we've done community cleanups, right? Free dump day, bring us your hazardous materials. The intention of that fund, however it is funded, is to reinvest it in the community first and then into the program. One of the other issues that has passed our state level is a standard of training for code enforcement, right? Which means training, which means cost, right? And so there's all of these additional state mandated things that go into, the ongoing cost of code enforcement. So being able to allocate some of those funds from our cost recovery to continue to improve our neighborhoods and communities and enhance our program is likely the best way to go forward.
All right, thank you. And we're going to bring it back over to our CAO, Steve Smith.
Thank you, Honorable Chair and Supervisors. I just wanted to follow up on a couple comments. One, I think Supervisor Stevens had mentioned wanting to have less to do kind of with the exceptions, which I appreciate. I've read through parts of the grand jury report for Yolo County for the Esparto fireworks disaster, and they point out in there that various county officials, and they don't mean just supervisors or anyone, but just various county officials may have known about this and didn't do anything about it. And the more that staff can independently act, I think, the better. But of course, there's always exceptions, and your board will be able to make those determinations. For staffing, Yuba County has 5 or 6 code enforcement officers plus a supervisor, but they have significantly more people in the unincorporated area. So I just wanted to offer that up as a comparison. And then the cost of the program itself, I think we showed the cases opened versus the inspections, and then the actual citations issued are probably 5%. We can change that, but it means not being as lenient with people. So we have a balance. If we want the program to more easily cover itself, and then if so, you can build from there. And if you're covering the costs and then some, you can hire another officer. But the more lenient we are, the less money we're going to generate from it. So it's just a balance that we have to consider when we move forward with our final policies and procedures. So, thank you.
Through the chair, maybe I could just offer a few other comments just from our department's perspective. One, supervisors, you brought up the code enforcement program being complaint driven, and I will say that it's complaint driven because that's how the ordinance was originally generated. Our department has worked in conjunction with County Counsel's office, certainly my time since 2018, and there have been a number of revisions to the ordinance to try to I think to CAO Smith's point, right, in order to find the balance between our citizens and gaining compliance, but also developing a good quality of life, right, for all of the neighbors. And that's what our department, works to do, and that's what the officers work, and with James, to try to find the balance so that we process cases to the betterment for everyone involved, right? We're not seeking just to throw fines on property owners and put it on special tax assessments or put down liens, because that may not garner the result, for the property to be cleaned up or, and to be, like say, what everybody would want in their neighborhood. So it's complaint driven because that's how the ordinance was created originally. If your board would seek, would like our department to consider more of just a code enforcement program that, yes, there's complaints, but the department also goes and they observe code issues and then they enforce them appropriately. That can be something, for another conversation we're happy to have with your board, and we can make those changes. Once again, there's a concept of leniency and just understanding, right, as to how we would enforce that. And I think it's going to be important as we bring, the proposed ordinance back before your board, we can talk through some of the specific aspects of that can be adjusted or modified, right? It's being developed because there are some legislative changes. And I think, our department has worked, and, there were lots of the grand jury information, and in 2021, we kind of had a report to your board in June of 21. And then since then, we've been operating. And I think you've seen that the number of cases and stuff, and maybe some of the low-hanging fruit of code issues have gone away. Right, and so the code cases we have now, they're much more involved, right? There's land use issues in addition to building or environmental health septic issues. I will go and tell you the county had a new aerial photograph generated, and it generated 300 illegal structures, a lot of them carports that unfortunately were built on people's septic fields. That creates, those aren't something that someone's going to resolve in 30 days, right? And it's not a $1,000 problem solution, right? That's anywhere from $5,000 to $50,000 to solve. And most people just don't have those funds available. So that's why, the time frame to close cases, it modifies, and we can maybe begin making maybe quarterly reports to your board, and maybe that will help on kind of our case closure. But we appreciate your time this afternoon, and like I say, we're looking for feedback and guidance, but we can develop this proposed ordinance, bring it for your board with some of the comments that we received today, and then we'll look to move forward.
No, I appreciate it, Neil. If there's anything else, we're going to adjourn this meeting. And really quick, you brought up the carport. That's something I've been working on for the last 2.5 years. So we'll see where that thing goes. But thank you very much for your time.
Tuesday on Government Watch, you can support, sir. Help keep the community aware with Yuba-Sutter.LIVE.
truth that comes through.